Hi class, another lecture for you guys today. Today we're going to be talking about factors that influence a new species. So we have five main factors that do that. Of course, as always, I love to start with our vocab so that we can all be on the same page when we're talking about these new words. So our first vocab word is a species. A species is a group of organisms that share a genetic heritage, are able to interbreed, and create offspring that are fertile. So my able got cut off a little bit here, but species, let's break this down as always. So it's a group of organisms. We've learned what organisms are, and they share genetic heritage. So when we were talking about evolution, I believe we talked about a change in genetic material of a population. So genes are what, uh, so DNA is made of genes. Sorry, genes are made of DNA. So genes are what we see in people, right? So like we can say that we have a gene for, it's a group of DNA. So we can say we have a gene for our hair. That's our hair gene. So depending on the way that our parents' DNA combines, our hair gene might be color brown or maybe red. So we need to be able to share our genes. We need to be able to interbreed and create fertile offspring. So interbreed is able to procreate is another word. Um, they're able they're able to mate is another way to say it. So we can have species that can come together and then also their offspring. So once they do breed together or mate, they can create offspring that are fertile. So offspring that can also have more offspring. Sometimes some organisms come together that create offspring that are not fertile, that cannot have kids, cannot have uh, other organisms. So that's our definition of a species. A population is simply a community of organisms who interbreed. So population, a community, so a group of organisms who interbreed. Oops, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Okay, so our factors that are influencing these, we have five main factors. We've talked about natural selection in our video before, and we used a great example of giraffes. Just to let you guys remember, natural selection is the organisms with a competitive advantage in their environment will have more access to resources and are more likely to survive and produce offspring. That is our definition of natural selection. We also call it survival of the fittest. So I'm going to skip through that one a little quickly because we spent a whole video on it. Our second factor that influencing new species is genetic drift. Genetic drift. So let's define genetic drift. Um, Genetic drift is allele frequency of a population changing over time due to random chance. So alleles are very similar to genes. We can think of them in the same way. Um, Alleles are on genes actually. So a part of our gene is an allele. Um, so some of our genes can get really big, and maybe we have a gene that is our eye color, our hair color, and our height. So the allele would be just the part that is for our eye color. So um, various forms of a gene, yep. For an allele, various forms of a gene. Our examples are our blood type, our height, our eye color, and hair color. So sometimes we can have a different eye color than our parents. A blue eye is actually a genetic mutation. So a random chance we have a different allele than our parents, and so we can get a different eye color than them. The same goes with our blood type. Our blood types can be A, B, AB, or O, and they can all be positive or negative. And then maybe we get a family member who's a lot taller than the rest of the family. That's because our allele randomly had a random chance to change some. Our second one is genetic drift. Oh, a population of humans. Oh, my example is a population of humans have more blue eyes than brown eyes. An important thing with genetic drift is that it can change something, but it's usually not advantageous to have this difference. So, for example, it's not advantageous to have a different eye color or a different hair color or blood type. It really is just kind of random. So, so that's number two. Number three is a genetic mutation. So a genetic mutation is a permanent change in DNA sequencing. This change may or may not be harmful, and it could cause things such as sickle cell anemia, which happens in our red blood cells. We have a picture over on the right. It could cause cystic fibrosis, which causes our mucus cells to become thick and sticky, and possibly cancer. So let's go back to our definition. A permanent change, permanent meaning it is there forever. It cannot be reversed. And in our DNA sequencing, so in our DNA we have different different chains of molecules. So as soon as we change one, and it usually happens during our replication, if we change one, it could either have it could have no effect, or it could be very harmful. So it's important to know that it can be both. Looking at our sickle cell anemia example, um, just a slight change in our DNA sequence can cause our red blood cells, which are normally this nice circular shape, to become this almost weird kind of crescent looking, kind of like the moon, kind of this half crescent looking. So normally when they're this nice circle, they can pass through our arteries very well. This is a picture of an artery. But when they become this crescent looking or sickle looking shape, they clog a lot more. And once we have our clogged arteries, we tend to have heart attacks. So it is really, really bad. But a genetic mutation is our second set that can cause a new species. And our fourth is geographical isolation. So our definition is a population is separated by some kind of physical barrier. And our best example of this is finches, which are a type of bird in the Galapagos Islands, which are just west of South America. So we can see up here where we are on our big map. On our little map here are all our different islands. These finches were such small birds that they couldn't fly from island to island. So the ocean was a physical barrier that isolated this population. So our original population started together. Maybe maybe some of them got on a boat or maybe a piece of wood and floated in the ocean for a little bit to get to our next island, or maybe even the waters rose. Maybe we were right in here. Some birds were over here, and the ocean level rose. So now we have it filled in. So we have this nice physical barrier, and then we have what is called speciation. So it creates two new species from one population just because of a nice physical barrier. And our last one is reproductive isolation. So our definition of reproductive isolation is physical or behavioral differences that prevent interbreeding populations from having offspring. So some examples are different breeding times, different habitats, or different reproductive organs. So psychological, let's go back to psychological, can be is talking about the way that we think, the thoughts that we have, or even the thoughts that animals have. So it's maybe some animals will look, for example, I think gorillas, the way that they choose. Excuse me, class, I'm yawning and I need to rest some more. But I think the way gorillas choose a mate is by whichever mate is the strongest. So psychologically, the females will not choose certain males because they may come off as weak. So that's psychological. Behavioral is a similar idea. So those differences that prevent interbreeding. Um, Behavioral is more of like our breeding time. So these two frogs look very similar and they live in the same environment, but this one breeds in July and this one breeds in January. So because that's the time that they like to have their offspring, uh, they will not interbreed, and they are two separate species. Another example comes in habitats. So maybe some ants that live in trees and only are on trees their whole lives will not interbreed with with ants that are on the ground. So that is a difference in habitat. And then a difference in reproductive organs just means that for whatever reason, the cells, when they come together, um, won't won't produce a offspring. So our quick review is we have our 5 ways of creating new species. We have genetic drift, natural selection, genetic mutation, geographical isolation, and reproductive isolation. So I hope that was clear. If you guys have some questions, as always, please let me know. Thank you.